Make a motion that we call this to order.
So moved at 7:01. Good evening, everyone. New face here, I apologize. Joe is out of town, so I'm taking the chair. It's been about 6-8 months, so I might be a little rusty, but these guys will keep me in the order, I'm sure of that. So let's start off with the board norms. I'm going to do something a little different. I'm just gonna point to somebody and have them read the first section of the board norm. Young lady.
Like the main,
Yeah.
our main focus?
Yeah.
Maintain our focus. Stay focused on the students, community, and stakeholders. Decisions are made in alignment with the board's vision, and keep meetings goal-oriented.
Mike.
Oh, next section? Communicate respectively. Practice active listening. Cultivate opportunities for all members to contribute, value, and respect other opinions.
Trish.
We are working to be present and be prepared for all meetings and arrive on time, be engaged during meetings and ask questions, and attend all meetings.
Ken.
Let's see. Keep board productive and effective. After a healthy discourse, there are
Come on, it's only 0.4 font, man.
yeah, I know, really, you know, it's like,
Sorry, Ken.
now you're making me look at this and it's like, I think I have to go get new
Prescription.
glasses.
Yeah, brand new year. New,
Thanks a
new
lot,
script.
now you make me feel
Sorry.
another 10 years older. Voices respectfully heard. Move forward with discussions made by the board, whether you support those decisions or not.
Yeah, it's 4.
Dedicated. It is very small.
Be dedicated to the work and goals of the board.
All right, excellent. Ken, right next to me. We're gonna mix it up.
Respect the agenda. Keep to the topics on the agenda and work plan. Start and end on time. Oh, I like that one. Practice flexibility and responsiveness to the public.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Those are our board norms. Members of the public, welcome. If there's anything that's not on the agenda that you wanted to speak to, please let us know now, or otherwise we'll just move on with the agenda. Anybody? No? All right, moving on. Correspondence. Did we have any correspondence?
I got a couple things. One is about additions and corrections. Just if we could add pay orders, either to the consent agenda or to new business. Your call.
Okay, consent agenda.
They've all been reviewed. They just need to be approved. I just wanted to clarify on a statement I made at the last meeting. Our wonderful clerk, Anita Bean, made sure that as we have petitions being submitted, I reported that 1% were necessary for the whole group, which came out to, I believe, 39 or 43 signatures. But there is a statute that says no matter the size of your union school district, you must have a minimum of 60. So I wanted to make sure that I said this aloud. I have let our clerk know that, so that when anybody picks up a petition or brings a petition, and I've sent a correction to the comments. So I just wanted to make that point. And then correspondence I sent out today. I don't know if you guys saw it in your email, but the WCSU officers are calling a special meeting on Monday, February 10th, an agenda to be come out by the end of this week, specifically about the weighting study that was done by the, commissioned by the Agency of Education, would have significant financial repercussions in the positive to the West River Education District. There was a meeting with 4 representatives, Representative Pajala from Stratton and from Jamaica, Representative Partridge from Wyndham, Representative Sibilia from Dover-Wardsboro, and Representative Gannon, who represents Wyndham Southwest. They had a meeting on Saturday to talk about this, and there were some additional WCSU board members there, so they're going to have a meeting to talk about any actions that the WCSU may take in supporting moving that forward. So just wanted to get that date on everybody's calendar.
Bill, could you just speak to how that would impact us, the weighting study?
Sure. So real briefly, the weighting study just reviews the weights that go into an equalized pupil. When Act 60 and Act 68 came into play, weights were given to students in high school at 1.13, recognizing it would be more expensive to educate a high school student. Also, a weight was given for poverty, a weight was given for English language learners, and also in that law, it was supposed to be redone every 2 years, and it has not been redone every 2 years. So this study that was completed in 2019 was the first time since 1996. So a system of weights has been in place for 23 years without review. Under the new study, the West River Education District would see anywhere from an additional 60 to an additional 69 equalized pupils, which is a significant change from where we are now. So it is something that is of particular interest to this board and these communities. So February 10th, 6 o'clock.
Is there any potential that that would impact this particular budget this year?
All of my communications with the people in the legislature are no, it would not be this year. The amount of speed that would be necessary and the amount of people that would need to weigh in to have that happen before crossover just doesn't seem realistic.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing because I actually went to that
Awesome.
that meeting on Saturday. One of the things the representatives were urging was for us to write to the legislature, give, how this has actually harmed our schools over the last 20 plus years. Programming's had to be cut to keep budgets in line, and it's just been unfair about our more rural, poorer communities. We're proportionately paying more than some of the more dense, richer communities.
Well, it's a really good point because that's the big change in the weighting study, is giving value to low population density. That was not part of the original formula in 1996 and 98, and it is now part of that. So that is the gigantic change.
Wow. So Lori, just quick math, but that would add, about 15% to our
Well, if you
total student count?
you increase your equalized pupils by 60, it still wouldn't get you down to the threshold, but close, 19.5 would be
You read my mind.
cost per student.
Or, I'm sorry, can you speak up a little bit? We have some people in the audience.
Sure, I'm sorry, I'm getting a cold here. Adding 60 equalized pupils, as Bill was just talking about, would basically bring the cost per student down to 19.5. So it would still not get it under the threshold, but it would be very close, depending on what the threshold did over the next couple of years as well.
So basically,
That's just using today's numbers, right?
so basically though, if they're doing this across the state, changing the weight of each pupil, right? In reality, are we not just changing the whole number? You're gonna have, even if we have a lower cost per pupil, are they gonna wind up lowering the threshold? Okay, so this whole thing with changing, balancing numbers and everything else to make it look like there's more kids, or make it look like there's less kids, or each kid gets more, or costs more money to educate, or less money to educate, really in the long run doesn't matter, because no matter what formula you use, if you do it across the state and spread it around, it's still gonna come out, you have one pot of money that everybody pays into, and one pot that you take out of to educate the kids. Right?
They just mentioned they were redistributing
Right.
how they were spending it.
Right, if they were really worried about this, what they should do is work on getting rid of the hold harmless, the cutoff where the penalty, the penalty comes in where we pay $2 for every dollar up to the state is ridiculous, because it's already costing you more to educate your kids, and then they're gonna penalize you and charge you more to educate your same kids, but meanwhile, you're sending more money out of your district than you are using it to educate your kids. It makes no sense. So the legislature really needs to work on the real numbers and the real problems, instead of just throwing numbers around and saying, oh, we're gonna fix this and make this look better.
All right, well, thanks, Ken. I got really excited about that, and now you just...
I just busted your bubble,
You
right?
burst my bubble.
I'm sorry about that.
And then lastly, before we get into the budget, I just wanted to, normally we have a childcare provider, and today, I found out today at 5 o'clock that we were not, so I apologize if anybody was planning on that. It is our plan to always have that. This was kind of an unforeseen thing, so I do apologize for that.
Wasn't it because of the budget?
No, it was not because of the budget.
Speaking of the budget, let's move on to budget fourth look. Discussion and possible action. So we were presented after the last meeting of asking for items that would not impact our children, our students. And the administration came back with $538,000 in potential cuts. Laura, if you want to kind of go through all of them?
I can.
Bill, or, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no
Go
problem.
ahead.
Just for everybody in the audience, there's a copy of this. It's two-sided, looks like that. So we as an administrative team were tasked with completing this exercise for the board. We met, we reviewed, we analyzed, we edited, we reflected, and then ultimately it was my responsibility to provide a cohesive presentation for the board, of which you all see now. These are not in any order, but they do accomplish the task that the board set forth to us, I believe, of getting over, being able to identify more than $500,000 in reductions that would not affect current student programming, and trying to be as creative as possible. So it was a task that we took on under the direction of the board and willingly, and I hope that we have delivered what it was the board was looking for. And myself or any of our principals can answer any clarifying questions if you guys have any on that.
Trish?
One of the things that I was looking at that I thought probably answer is Leland Gray going to an 8-period day. How is that more efficient? Why does that make the day more efficient?
All right. Well, I'll tell you that, then I want to tell you something else. It makes more, so right now, we have a block schedule at the high school, which means that we have 4 blocks in the fall, 4 in the spring. Teachers teach 3 in each semester for a total of 6 teaching assignments. With an 8-period day, a teacher could teach 7 assignments and have still a prep period, meet the contract for that needs, and basically teach an extra section. So without reducing any offerings, a teacher could teach 1 more section. So you could reduce some staff in 4 core departments to make that happen. Now you're right from the other side of it. I wouldn't recommend it. So Leland and Gray moved to a block schedule 20-something, 98, there you go. We understand. Yeah, I was a teacher here at the time. Few of these people were probably students. And it was a very thoughtful process by the staff with multiple years of study and research and 1 year of an interim schedule that had a little bit of a modified day and then rolling into it. And it was a process that was probably led by the principal at the time, but really fully informed by the entire school community, the staff and students alike, to make a shift back to that as in a sense, a board directive without having the opportunity to study the educational benefits of that and do it strictly for budgetary reasons. I just don't think is a sound approach, but the dollars and cents are there. I will tell you that prior to this discussion and Bill asking me to do this, our staff has, I think for the first time since '98, reformed a scheduling committee to analyze the schedule, but we're looking at school year 22, not next year, but the year after, because it will take us a year and a half to really fully vet out what our options might be. And not that we would necessarily go into it thinking that we would change, but just to explore where the world has changed in the last 20 years, so let's see if it's worth looking at. So that's how you can get the savings out of that without losing any programming. But I would not recommend that's a path that you guys should follow.
Question. Do we want to kind of just go through each one and we can just ask for commentary on each of them? We'll do that. Let's start with the reduce 1.0 FTE WRED administrator. Bill, if you want to just kind of...
So the concept behind this is assigning administrators to a student ratio, around 1 to 130 to 150 students. Recognizing that you have to figure out different situations for different buildings, but the thinking would be that you'd have 2 full-time administrators at Leland and Gray for approximately 300 students. You'd have 1 full-time administrator at Townsend for 120 to 130 students, and you'd have 1 full-time administrator at Newbrook, where there's about 95 students, and Jamaica, where we're predicting 25 to 26 students next year. Now, all the caveats aside, we have not done school choice for round 2, which won't happen until March, so we're going on our best information that we have. In doing so, I thought it was critically important that we consider what it would look like at Jamaica. We wanted to make sure that there was a level of service to the community of Jamaica and to the students of Jamaica. And so we included an increase of a para-educator working under the assignment of the principal and the lead teacher. We would redesign the admin assistant position to increase the reliance on being a school aide. We would increase the counseling services at Jamaica, even though there would be less students, because we want to make sure that there's multiple points of adult contact for those students. We would put a administrator who worked predominantly at Newbrook as the principal of record at Jamaica with a lead teacher who would receive a stipend. And that would be the structure at Jamaica. Townsend would look very similar, and you'd have a reduction of service in the administrative level of 0.5 at Leland and Gray. And if you did all of that, you would be able to reduce the budget by $103,617.
Bill, I have a question. Are there any studies on like retention and outcomes or student outcomes for having shared principals that you're aware of? And, you know, one of the things I've been hearing lately is, you know, obviously administration is a place where people are looking that we might be able to cut. So the question has been being asked, you know, do we really need 2 principals in LNG?
So I'll take your first question first. I am not aware of any very specific longitudinal studies on split principals. It's really dependent on, at least in my 15 years of experience, they can go really, really well, and they can go really, really poorly, depending on the people that you have involved, the system, and the place. In terms of Leland and Gray having one FTE, I think that with the range of students from 11 to 19 and the great transformation that occurs both developmentally and educationally during that time period, that my recommendation would be I would not drop below 2 administrators at Leland and Gray. However, I think your point is well taken that anytime we have a change in enrollment and shifting of students, it is worthy to look at what is an appropriate staffing. But in this scenario, I would recommend highly not to drop below 2 full-time administrators.
And then, just if I can, last meeting, we talked about you were going to look at how the effect of school choice maybe. Remember we talked about that last meeting and how that might affect?
Yes, so I included that in your packet.
Okay.
It's a deep thing in there, but basically the state board education rule puts everything into clusters. So we are fine on the amount of ratios that we have and the students we have in classes.
And to follow up on Mike's question here, at the last meeting in Jamaica, one of their main concerns were that there was no equity because they didn't have a principal in the building. And the first thing we have here is we're going to reduce another principal.
I recognize that, so I
Okay,
tried
so
very...
I just find it funny that the main complaint at the last meeting, besides the fact of 19%, for 19% increase, we don't have a principal in the building, was seemed to be like a huge concern. The first reduction we have is we're going to get rid of another principal. And I just find that peculiar, to say the least.
Well, what I tried to do is be as creative as I possibly could to get as many points of adult contact that would be increased for those students in that community. But you are correct, it is a reduction in the direct support of an administrator. I could not find how we could organize ourselves in a way to reach the financial target in this particular thing without organizing in such a way. Does not mean that that's the way to go, but for the purposes of this exercise, that is the design that ultimately I came up with.
Well, I see that it's Newbrook's. It seems to be whoever the Newbrook principal would be the one that would be also doing Jamaica. And I understand you're doing this because of numbers, right? Correct. Number of students. You had
Yes.
those numbers of students up to equal to what Townsend is, but now you got the one principal acting. You have 3 principals in the center of our district, and you have one all the way down one end that's supposed to take care all the way over on the other end. So if there's a problem where that principal needs to be over there at the other building, they have to leave the one building and go all the way over to the other building, whereas you have 3 administrators right here smack dab in the middle of the district.
Yes, I understand
The logistics of that decision doesn't make any sense to me either.
Well, when you have a situation where you have multiple adults that could address things that principals might be solely responsible for currently, those responsibilities could be distributed so that the education and the safety of the students could continue just under a different configuration. It may not be the configuration the board wants to go with, but it's the configuration that I was able to develop that I thought met the goals and the needs for not only the students, but also for the task at hand.
I think you have some technical questions.
Yes.
Hi, Karen Amadin from Jamaica. I was the one who brought up principals at the last meeting. And we did not say that we do not have a principal. Our principal is right.
No, you said you didn't have a principal in the building. Is exactly what
That
was
is
said.
not what I said.
You can go to the video.
I said we have a principal here who is working 1 to 2 days a week. But it is not enough for Jamaica. And we wanted someone who could be there more during the week. But we did not say that we do not have a principal in the building.
Okay. Not what I heard, but okay.
But that being said, will we have a principal in the building at all?
It'll depend on what the direction of the board that gives to me. Under this plan, you would have a lead teacher, you would have additional levels of service, and you would have a principal who would not be stationed in the Jamaica building more than 1 to 2 days a week, depending on what was going on. That is the design that I have presented. Whether that is the design that the board wants me to go with or not. I was trying to be as creative as I possibly could while serving the needs of the students.
Sorry, there's a tie. Go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
So Jamaica would have 1 teacher?
2 teachers.
One would be. But you won't know how many kids are going to be there after, I mean, it's March?
Correct.
So would that depend?
Well, so as the board well knows, after school choice, we have to look at things just like we did last year, and we would have to do things this year. And the direction the board gave me last year was, don't spend any more money. We've already approved a budget. Organize the staff where they need to be based on what happens with school choice. And so I'm assuming that I would have that same sort of direction that I would have to work with.
Anybody else? All right, let's move on to the additional nurse request.
So additional nurse request came from the budget committee work over the past couple months. Each principal made an advocacy for what they believed they needed in their building to serve their students. On the first review of the budget, we reduced the initial nurse request by 0.50, and on this one, we reduce it back to what our current level of service. We are expecting the same number of students, and so it would not reduce the level of service that we are currently providing to our students. It would just not increase based on a request of the principal.
All right. And how about reduce additional technology services?
So originally, we had a 1.15 increase. We dropped it to 0.65, and then this one is dropped to 0.15. I kept the 0.15 just because we are integrating many new software systems, and the level of support necessary for the classroom teachers and the principals, any little bit would help, and that 0.15 is a very small investment, I think, to continue keeping our teachers' ability to be focused on instruction.
All right, additional custodian.
Again, same thing. We had a full-time custodian in the original. We reorganized ourselves to 0.5. This is additional to what we have now, so it is not having any additional custodial services. We do have the same number of buildings. We do have the same number of students. We will work with what we currently have, and we will organize them according to the needs of the building, but it won't be an increase in personnel.
And building projects beyond regular maintenance.
So we budget for regular maintenance, things that have to be cleaned and taken care of, but anything beyond that, painting, tile replacement, carpet replacement, window replacement, we consider to be project-based. And so in this suggestion, we are getting rid of all large projects and small projects for this year. We will complete our engineering study here at the Leland and Gray building, which will be done this spring. We just essentially would hold off on doing anything beyond just keeping the building clean and making sure that students were safe.
All right, reduce general music by 0.1.
So going through this process and making sure that we are being as lean and organized as possible, the principals were able to identify that we could reduce general music by 0.10 without reducing any service to the students that they're currently getting. So that is a reduction of a half a day, while shifting some responsibilities to make sure that the students currently get the same level of general music service.
Okay. Reduce supply and book budget.
So that was just basically taking 25% across the board on all those and just saying we're going to fulfill those requests at 75%. Doesn't have to be this way forever, but for this year in a tight budgetary situation, we're going to pull back and fund it at 75%.
Agency fund analysis, plus 16,000.
So in the section 1 of your folder, we did an agency fund analysis summary along with each individual purchase. There was discussion at the last board meeting about the differences in cost between purchasing a service from the agency fund. And just as a reminder, the agency fund is where the WCSU hires people and then different districts ask for certain levels of service. So you could have a full-time counselor that works 0.5 in West River, 0.2 in Marlboro, and 0.3 in River Valleys. You can have a full-time employee, you get to increase their ability for longevity because they know they're working full-time, rather than 3 entities hiring out a piece of those people. So we did an analysis of all of those purchased services and what it would look like if they were individually purchased by West River, and we're actually saving $16,000 by doing it currently. That does not change the fact that now that we have gone through 2 years of budgeting for West River, that we will be doing a deeper dive on which particular areas can we do direct purchase on, what makes sense to continue working with the agency fund. That analysis we can do at a deeper level with every single WCSU participant and be able to have more recommendations in the fall for each individual board.
Does anybody object to removing that one?
No objection.
Okay. Change admin assistant job description.
So this goes back to the first one. If we are going to, well, either, regardless of whether we are or we aren't, wanted to take the board's directive of being creative as deeply as possible, and just recognize that if there's opportunities to redefine some job descriptions around what are necessary for an admin assistant to do in a building that is very different from having 70 kids down to 20, possibly 25. How could we maximize the investment that we are making in that person for our students and for our communities? So that was just the idea that we would redesign the basic functions of that job so that we could free up time throughout the day that could be used as service to the students.
All right. Create Townsend 4-5, class of 25 students.
So in the original budget presented to the board, we split this class. They currently are a 4-5 class that has 24 students. We're projecting 25 students next year. So it would be an additional student. Going back to Mike's point, because not only on school choice did we want to look at the rules, we also wanted to look at the SBE rules for appropriate class size, and they lump 5 and 6 together, and 25 is the average. So we are well below a 25 average in a 5-6 cluster. When you look at 6th grades that are between 19 and 21. It is being currently done at 24. The recommendation from the principal was we would like to split it, but again, in this environment of our current reality, this doesn't have to be a forever decision, but for next year, it is a possibility that again would not change the programming or service level that we currently do. And then in the notes, I just wanted to point out that, you know, we set this up and we had to think about this last year for this year, that you know, if additional students come, we would have to be creative in how we're going to service them, and I just wanted to alert the board to that.
Or we modify the choice policy so that we don't incur extra costs on choice, right? That's a
Well, actually, the choice policy already makes it happen so that, like, that is not open.
Okay.
That is, you're locked in.
All right.
There are no openings in 4-5 in
Right.
town.
Gotcha.
All right, and finally, Leland and Gray going to an 8-period day.
And I think Bob explained this really, really well, so it's just important to recognize that it is possible. It might be something that we want to think about on a longer-term study to see how that would work. But again, we wanted to respect the request of the board to do a deep dive and look into some efficiency possibilities. So it is possible, but it does have some serious impacts on hiring people and retaining people that I think are worthy of consideration.
All right, thank you. Great review. I think the only two that I kind of sensed had the most contention were probably the first one, reduce 1.0 FTE for the RED administrator, and then the final one, Leland and Gray going to an 8-period day. Anybody want to speak to how we want to move forward with that, or thoughts on it? Do anything?
Well, first, yeah, I appreciate the work. I'm pleased to see that you guys came up with creative solutions to the challenging situation that we face. I'm hopeful that this weighting study will help to further ease the pain on our taxpayers when we're not sending our money off to other places. I support the reduction of the administrator. I think the solution that you have for Jamaica School is appropriate. I am interested to hear a little bit more about, what Leland and Gray's plan. Sounds like you've already kind of started this discussion ahead of our budget challenge. So I think that's, I'd like to hear a little bit more about how that's going to go and where we think we're going to be. But from my perspective, I think we should go ahead and leave the reduction in administrator and hear a little bit more about Leland and Gray.
The last one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great.
So I have a question.
Go
So the reduction in administrator, and I'm sure the public will speak up if I misspeak, we're also talking about changing the admin assistant job to take on a .50 FTE para position.
Separate. They're both going to happen. We would add an additional half-time paraeducator under the direction of the lead teacher. So another adult that would be available for,
Right.
as well as redesign the admin assistant position.
But we're reducing administration in the school. So.
Yes.
So I'm just curious about how taking the admin away from jobs that, and I'm sure that people will correct me, I've heard she's taking on some of, the disciplinary action that happens when the principal's not in the school today. Have we discussed that with the admin? Do we understand how that is working?
I am not aware of that particular thing, but in my suggestion here for the level of service, the lead teacher would be in complete charge while on site, and the admin assistant aide and the paraeducator would work for the lead teacher. So if there was an immediate need for the service of a principal-like environment, I would suspect that under the direction of the superintendent and the principal who is overseeing Jamaica, that the actions would be taken by the lead teacher, not by a paraeducator or an aide. But
Well, I like the sound of that. I'm just,
Yes.
I think there's been concerns expressed.
that would be the design, and that would be the follow-through that would come from my office.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just kind of hoping that administrators would speak to that and what your thoughts on it are. How do you feel about it? As a how well is this going to function kind of conversation?
I can't speak to the Jamaica piece at all, but you know me, I always have something to say.
Yeah.
So just to back up a little bit, so the position, the halftime position at Leland and Gray that would be reduced, or reorganized, however we end up doing that, was actually budgeted this year as a full-time position. And you guys may recall that person left at the end of the school year, and we were not able to, well, we made a decision based on personnel. We had a experienced principal at Jamaica part-time to incorporate that person into ours and take that savings for this fiscal year. So really what you're seeing in 1 year's budget to the next is actually a full-time reduction at Leland and Gray in the administrator. Just want to make sure people understand that chain of events. And the argument certainly could be made, like Mike said, that maybe is too heavy. And all I would say about that is I think the impact on not having that half a person here or the full person here, regardless of how you look at it, is that positive change, the rate of positive change will be slowed. So that's, I mean, can Leland and Gray survive with 2 administrators? Yeah, sure, absolutely. 300 kids, very manageable, I think, with 2 full-time administrators. But I think that the implications of how we currently organize our roles, so I am the principal overseeing all of it and doing supervision and evaluation in the high school. Pam, as a half-time employee, as the dean of academics, oversees the middle school and the supervision evaluation there. And Johanna, as the dean of students, does all student management and is responsible for climate and culture, those kinds of things. So, something gives, I guess is the best way to put it. So that would be my 2 cents from Leland Gray. I can't speak to the Jamaica piece or how it impacts someone at Newbrook or how it would impact the people who get to Jamaica.
And I can only speak to that part. I certainly cannot speak to how it would impact Scotty. I come from a place with many, many more students and a lot less, in some cases, resources. But when we examined this particular scenario, one of the suggestions I had was a lead teacher, a part-time teacher, administrator look to it. And so I'm pleased that we were able to kind of come to a conclusion of having that lead teacher to do some of those administrative things as well as working with the kids. The other thing that I was concerned about was the supervision of students in non-instructional situations, which is why the administrative assistant could be a school aide. So that person could take on the supervision in the cafeteria. So then the teachers would have some planning time or be able to collaborate. And so that would be restructured to be able to make sure that that's in place. Recess duty, things like that. Right now, teachers are doing all of that. A school aide would be able to do some of that. The para, when we looked at that, was really to assist with students with special needs and to be able to help in classroom situations, as well as with the special education teacher. So I think putting some of those defined pieces in place would help on the day-to-day administrative end of it. There would still need to be someone who would be working with formal student discipline, certainly a lead teacher in the event of significant disciplinary consequences. It would need to be a principal that would work with that lead teacher in terms of those kinds of things, which is what I currently do. I just drive the quick 11 miles or pick up a boat. And so I think putting those additional ways in place, thinking a little outside the box, would help to support that. I can't really speak to what the impact would be in Scotty's world. I would think it would sort of be like what I'm doing now. Instead of me going to Leland and Gray, he goes to Newbrook or he goes to Jamaica. You have to be very organized. I have my calendar pretty set, and probably the one thing that I've learned through all of this, I was very set when I started that it would be certain days at certain schools, and I really had to be pretty flexible about that, and that's been my goal the second half of the year, is to just be at the school I need to be at when I need to be there, whether it's a Monday or a Friday or whatever. And so it has taken a little bit of time with the travel, and that's probably the one thing, but I think we've been able in this scenario to put some supports in place that would help to mitigate some of the absence, if you will, of the principal.
We started talking about this last week because the board asked us to find some savings, and I was part of this decision in terms of what we were going to present, and I'm proud of our work. There's no doubt that the savings will cost us in terms of my time. You know, I'm one guy, and I'd be working at 2 schools, so that would change the level of service. I'm not concerned about it. This is my 6th year, and I'm feeling you know, up to this challenge. Again, I think that we'll all need to, if this were what the board were to decide to do, I would really need to redefine my role and kind of redefine the way I do my job. You know, I'm out in front of the building almost every morning. I'm greeting parents and children, and it would just be different. It'd be different. I think that as a measure to get us through this difficult time, I think you know, it might be something like you could think of this decision as a temporary decision or a long-term decision. I would definitely make the recommendation that it be considered a temporary decision, not on behalf of me. And by the way, I didn't go looking at School Spring after I left the meeting. I'm very comfortable working for this group and for the children that I serve, and I'm sure that kids in Jamaica are going to be super fun as well. I want you guys to make a decision with the kids in mind and not worry about us. You know, we totally understand the situation you're in. I've been at the last 2 meetings. I know how hard this is. So we thought if we could do something towards the savings, and that would be something we should do. I don't have anything else to say specifically, but I would definitely suggest that that you leave it to us to break down the details and figure out exactly how it would work. I've got a great mentor, and I've got great colleagues, and I'm sure we'll figure out a nice way of doing it.
Tricia.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Was there somebody out there?
Susie, did you have one?
Sorry, Daisy.
Would the special ed teacher who's there now, Michelle, still be at Jamaica School?
So we assign positions of people. I would not see we are not currently planning on a reduction in the level of special education service that is currently provided to the Jamaica building.
Awesome, thank you.
Over here, Fiona's had her hand up.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Fiona, I'm from Williamsville, and I don't know if this is the right point to ask this question in this comment, but because it's part of administrative change. I was listening, I wasn't able to be at last meeting, but I listened to it, and I was concerned that the board made the choice to ask this reduction without considering the administrative, the WCSU administrative costs. And I understand that that's because that vote has already happened. But to look at the SPED and the agency fund, which is part of the WCSU, but not take a look at the administrative costs for the administrative building, I think is short-sighted, because that is the place that has the least impact on programs, because they have the less interaction with kids. And also when I heard that the administrative raises for next year were between 3 and 3.5%. Did I get that right, Bill?
You did.
And that the teaching staff's wages are 2.5. That seems
3.25.
3.25. Okay. Then I misunderstood that point. Thank you. But I think that should be part of the equation. That part of the WCSU budget in looking at reductions. And I would like that to be re-looked at if possible within this scenario.
Well, so there is a meeting on February 10th, the WCSU. So that is definitely something that could be brought up.
Did you catch that, Fiona?
Yeah, I got it.
February 10th?
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, 7
And
is
then-
good. Keep us on our toes.
I don't want to take time
No,
away
go ahead,
from
go ahead.
board members and stuff, but I have a deep concern about the whole thing with Jamaica. I just don't, I don't totally understand this, but how it works, but if there's a sudden problem with a student and you've got a teacher teaching and suddenly they have to leave that room then you've got to pull the admin in, and maybe the admin doesn't know what the project was, what's going on, that kind of stuff. I don't think that's quality education to me. And I'm wondering when the board is going to be concerned about Jamaica and look at it. I recall a few years ago, the town of Jamaica, there were some parents who wanted us to leave the union. And that was a very concerning thing. I was on the school board at Leland and Gray at the time, and there was a big brouhaha about that. And Bob called in some of the parents to find out what their concerns were. What can we do to want you to stay here? And I've been waiting to things settle, and I know this is a new board, but when are you guys gonna look at what's going on with Jamaica? Why are people not wanting to send their children there when they live right in that town? That's, you know, there was so much concern about it back then, but I haven't heard a single word said from this board about how do we make Jamaica a vital part of our educational programs.
Al, can I respond to that for a second? Yeah. I think it was Patty who was speaking. Patty, I shared that concern and I addressed that in the retreat. I actually suggested that the board do surveys to find out why people left a certain school. It's easy to assume it could be programmatic or site-specific, but it could also just be convenience for parents. So I suggested that we do surveys to find out what the reason was. Unfortunately, the board did not go along with that suggestion.
My concern about this, reducing an administrator at Leland and Gray, I feel like we, as a board, made a decision to move the 6th grade to this building and have it be a true middle school and be part of this community versus the elementary school community in a sense. And to then reduce oversight when there's now more students involved at this site, that's a concern to me. I just wanted to put that out there, which I supported the move of the 6th grade, and I think it's the right choice. I with children learning in clusters and 6, 7, 8 being one of those clusters, that made sense to me. But if we're just going to then take away oversight of this pretty big decision that we made, I think that's a little short-sighted personally.
Okay, can I?
Go ahead, Ken.
Thank you. This is directed to Scotty Debachny. You serve the Newfane and Brookline students over at Newbrook as a principal. And if you're going to be leaving that building for, I don't know, a day, 2 half days, or however that's going to work, how is that going to impact the students at Newbrook, is my question.
That's hard to say. I've never really experienced it. I think that we would have to shift responsibilities just in the same way that we're describing it at Jamaica. Currently, when I'm out of the building, I have a lead teacher. It's often Shelley Bostrom, who would be the lead person who would make decisions while I'm out. I'd need to be in contact with folks and available. As it is right now, I make a lot of decisions that could be delegated. They wouldn't be me doing them anymore, and that's different. I really trust my staff. I would say that one of the things that would surely change is that I'd be getting twice as much email. And that's the thing that's the first thing that I thought of was like, all right, I've got a certain amount of hours, and that would be a hurdle. But I think that with our
Are you hinting for a raise with this split?
I haven't talked about it yet. What I'm really, though, in my report, you'll see we've shifted the way we've handled discipline at Newbrook, and you've seen that very well. And I'm really very grateful to Stephanie Betty Hancock, who kind of encouraged that change. As it is, we've got 1 less referral per day on the average. So last year in October, we were at 3.5 referrals per day. Those are incidents in the building. It could be minor or major incidents. This year, we're at 2.5. which means that's one less child that needs to fail every single day, which I'm very, very proud of and very happy about. One of the things that's also shifted, though, is the responsibility of discipline. Most discipline in the building, harassment and bullying comes to me every time. Anything that was like an intentional harm of another child would come to me. But most other things are handled by our behaviorist and her staff, and it's going really well. And I feel like I'm ready for this challenge. It will have a cost, though. There's no doubt. And what I can foresee happening is that there will be some days where I have to go from one school to another. And I believe that's about 25 minutes. I just got a new used car, and I'm sure it's going to get me there. Ken, I appreciate you looking out for the school, which is what you always do. Again, we came up with these scenarios because how else are you going to come up with $500,000? We really sat down and really thought, all right, what can we do? And I landed here not with the hopes of having, what you're talking about, a raise, not for that reason, but because what else are we going to do, and how else can we help to shave away at this at the taxpayer's burden? So, I hear what you're saying, and it's going to be different. I will not be out front of the school every morning. I will not be poking into classes at the same rate that I do now. But with that change, especially if we think of it as a one-year thing or a two-year thing or a temporary thing, I'm not. It's not a. For me, it's not a major concern. If this is what you guys need us to do, we can do it. Did I answer the question?
So
you said you can do it. My question was, how's it going to impact the students? That was the question.
Yep. Ken, can I follow up on that? So I think we've identified the two items that could be most potentially harmful for students and disruptive. Lori, if I could just get your financial guidance here. If we were to exclude those two, that would put us at approximately 400,000 in reduction? Is that right?
The number one and the last one?
Yeah, and take out the plus
Take out the
16,000.
plus.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we might want that one
I don't think that
back.
was added, you didn't add that in, did you, Bill?
Yeah.
Oh.
Put everything in there. We'll
course he did.
We'll claw that one back.
We don't want that.
And if memory serves, every $50,000 is essentially equal to a penny in property tax?
Roughly.
Yeah, roughly.
Every 50,000 you reduce, the number changes, so there's a very long calculation.
Can I ask, are those calculations fair anymore with the diversity amongst the 4 towns? With the inequity of tax burden on the 4 towns, are those figures still, is that fair to say
50,000?
1 penny? Do you know what I mean? No. Well, it'll impact Jamaica differently than it'll impact Brookline.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say a penny's going to do,
We're talking about the unified tax rate.
Right.
Gotcha,
Right.
gotcha, thank you, thank you.
So to
And-
reduce the $401,000, get you to a unified tax rate of 201.
And how does that affect every town?
So it's not going to change anything for Brookline, Newfane, or Townsend because they have the 5% incentive protection. So it doesn't change anything there, and it gets, oops, I'm wrong. I have a lot of spreadsheets open here. All right, so that gets Jamaica to 20-cent increase or 10.83%.
Sorry, say it again?
10.83%.
20 cents or 10.83%.
But regardless, after the hold harmless is no longer in effect, and all those rolled back taxes that we are getting a break on now,
Yes, everybody.
it's still gonna, what change is gonna happen in Newfane and Brookline and Townsend is gonna roll and hit those towns in the long run, correct? If it's an increase?
Any increase in the tax rate will hit everybody when the incentives go away.
Okay.
And it's supposed to sunset in 2024 unless we were to
Right.
exceed it before that.
Right, the
And
5%, it really goes year to year. You could lose it next year depending on the budget and the tax rate that comes in.
Right.
So, for this year specifically, you would still keep it. Your incentive, your 5%.
It's not directly related, but could you explain how the academic support team works?
Sure. When we had the DMG study, you guys remember the DMG study?
Yes.
Oh, no? Okay. We were one of 10 supervisory unions to be part of the district management group study, which was a precursor to Act 173. So we had an audit of our instructional delivery system. And recommendations came out from that specifically for our SU, and they came out for all other 10 SUs. And they were collected into, these are the strategies that should be used across Vermont. So we got both the global strategy and we both got our internal strategy. One of the points that were made during the DMG thing was one of the ways to control costs to the best of our ability that's in the locus of control of instruction is to have the highest caliber, highest expertise people work with students who are struggling. Not just students that have made it to the point where they require an individual education plan, but students that are just struggling beyond the classroom instruction. And so there was a gap between delivering special education instruction and classroom instruction. And so one of the strategies that we investigated was the development of the academic support team. So the academic support team is 6.6 employees across West River, River Valleys, and Marlboro that meet monthly and are becoming, and were hired as, experts in either literacy or literacy in math. And we even have one that's particular to literacy in K through 3. We've initially assigned those people to different buildings based on the population, and as we get more data from our local comprehensive assessment system, those people are going to be shifted to the needs of the students. Right now, they're where they are because we don't have enough data. So they basically operate in a dual capacity. One, they're delivering direct service to students that need additional assistance beyond classroom instruction. And two, they are coaching and working with teachers about how to change that universal instruction so that their services become unnecessary.
Is this K-12 or?
Right, we are doing it right now at K through 5, and we hope to stretch it to the middle school next year.
So there's 6 additional teachers
Yes.
that are actually out with students that
Yes.
are not part of our count of.
They are out with working with students, and the exchange that we did is we reduced every single paraeducator that was working on academic instruction.
And I see that it's largely grant funded.
A majority is grant funded. There is about 117,000, I think, from West River. There's 86,000 from River Valleys. So there's a contribution that is equivalent to the level of service they're getting, but predominantly it is grant funded.
How long is that grant? Are we going to be?
So we use what we call our consolidated federal grant, and so we have been getting that since the beginning of time. And we only spend the amount that we know we're guaranteed to get. Sometimes there's some excess, sometimes, depending on what the federal government does, there's less. But we always budget ours so that we can provide the level of service we want for our students.
Okay.
Prior to the merge, we had 1.6 FTE at my school of academic support that came out of our local budget, probably cut with some federal grants as well. So some of the buildings, did you have prior to? So some of the buildings had people in place that they worked.
Yeah.
It's so much more efficient this year. It's incredible what Jen has done with her team, because they studied the data from each of the elementary schools before deployment, then they came into the school, they met with the kids. Now they come to our EST meetings and they're able to with language that parents can appreciate. They can really explain what the issue is and what it will take to overcome those issues. And I believe that it's going to lead us to fewer special ed referrals. I believe it's going to reduce the amount of frustration, especially the kids that are in grades like 3, 4, and 5, where they're starting to realize that, hey, I missed this. You know, and this doesn't always come. This isn't always self-made. I mean, we have a lot of kids that move in, and they might have missed something because the curriculum wasn't aligned. And so here we are. We're able to fill in these gaps and keep them with their friends where they're supposed to be, and maybe only out of the room for 20 minutes a day to work on fluency, or you know, it's really it's so impressive. You really ought to check it out.
So just kind of looking at I know it says here that you assign them as necessary. It looks like about 4 of those FTEs are basically kind of the percentage that we're buying into this.
I would have to defer to Lori to figure out those exact, but
Yeah,
yes.
somewhere in that. So, you know, when I'm thinking about those teachers and discussing, like, well, do we have 25 students in a 4 or 5 classroom, or do we have 2 teachers in Jamaica? We also have 4 additional experts that we're also applying to those same areas that are not part of those.
It's actually a very good point, because that's how we have to report them as well, because they are doing direct instruction.
So there's more adults in our building teaching our kids than what we're actually seeing on the other page.
You are seeing classroom teachers. Right, that is correct. Similar to how we will deploy special education teachers, and you don't see that. You just get an assessment of special education, and they're deployed based on the service page of the individual education plan. Paul?
So are those teachers, is that equal through all the schools?
So they-
I mean, I'm just wondering if all the
Sure.
schools, since they have,
It's all dependent on the number of students. So
So-
time is distributed based on number of
so
students.
does Jamaica have that now?
Yeah, but they don't have a full-time person, because there's 29 students.
And other schools do have a full-time person?
Yes. It's very similar to the principal.
So, yeah, so how is this equal for Jamaica? That was the whole thing about Act 46, 48, whatever. It was supposed to create an equal opportunity for things to happen at all the schools, and I see Jamaica getting short-shifted. I have a serious problem with the way this all has worked out. Not worked out to what I told my town it was gonna be.
Can I add to what Patty is saying? My name is Lisa. I have a student at Jamaica Village School. He is now a first grader, and he's with the K and 1 are together. And next year, if a teacher goes away, it'll be K1 and 2. Well, he's a very bright young man, and he could really benefit from some extra math. But he's taking care of the younger kids in the class. That's what's going on now. And that's going to be exacerbated next year. And that's really not desirable at all. And I am not seeing the values K through 6 up there. What happened to the foreign language? That went away. And cutting back, and then this young man is not challenged at all. And he doesn't, and if we don't have someone there to, and I spoke with Ms. Bernardo of that, and she was very helpful and spoke with me at length about it. But she has put forth a plan to provide for an individual, something to bolster his studies, but not until 2022. Well, that's too long for him to be hanging around. He's learning studying habits now, and he needs to receive a higher quality of stimulation. I'm all in support of helping people who are struggling, but I'd like to hear the opposite as well. How about the kids that are ready to excel? They're ready to launch, and he's not getting there at all.
We do not currently employ anybody that provides that level of service to any of our students in that particular job description.
Well, that's a very, excuse me, but bland response, because there needs to be, if there's to be equality among all of the students, he needs to receive at his level. He's not even at his level. He's missing out on time because there's one teacher for these, maybe next year, 3 grades. He's not getting the attention that he needs. And he'll be one of 2 students. And the other student is a very young girl. So he'll be a single male. maybe in a classroom of 6 kids. That's not equality of education. And I would just say as an aside to that, I'm excited about free choice, but I wonder if the board doesn't consider that maybe allowing a mass exodus out of Jamaica Village School was not the right way to go about it. Perhaps the lottery to allow people to go in a more paced fashion so that the school receiving all the students could be better prepared to absorb them instead of being overflowing. This is what I'm hearing from people here. They're jam-packed, too many students. And now here we are, we don't have enough students. Thank you.
Yes. Craig, I was waiting.
Yes. Craig Roach, principal of Townsend School. I hear you. I think you're probably referencing the jam-packedness of Townsend School. Those classrooms that we have, multi-grade, 3, 4, and 4, 5, are certainly filled with numbers. And that's tough. To have a teacher teach 2 grades is pretty difficult. And when we talk about teaching 2 grades, what you're really talking about is teaching 4 grades. Because if you're teaching 4, 5, you're really teaching 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 for the students who need the extra enrichment. Our academic support teachers, which is what we were talking about just before this, do provide that service for enrichment and additional opportunities for students who are achieving well beyond their grade levels. What I hear in the last few weeks, and I apologize, is we're really looking for quality of education at Jamaica, and we're really caring about Jamaica School and what it's going to become. And we're also trying to cut things from our budget that will impact our students and our teachers and staff at Townsend. And if we're going to talk about quality of education and equity, I think we do have all the same opportunities at Jamaica. If we're talking about percentage points, the number of students that attend and how often they get an opportunity to be with PAM or to be with AST. I would welcome anybody from Jamaica to come on down with us for school choice so we can offer those opportunities to serve kids. And that's our #1 job. Every single person up here is to take care of the education of kids and provide them with a really nice, caring environment to meet them at the level where they're at. So when I think about what kind of education can we give, and we're talking about cutting, I don't think we can have it both ways. And so the numbers are going down in Jamaica, for sure. But if you can help us support the quality of education that we're giving, especially from the people who have left Jamaica, we're providing with some really good opportunities. And I want to provide for your son. Scotty would certainly love to provide for your son to get what you think he needs. And there's really one way to do that is to support us and not cut so much. We can't increase population, but I can provide you a caring atmosphere with teachers who care and enrichment opportunities. But we also can't cut too much. So I guess that was a diatribe of my thoughts. But I don't know your son, but I would welcome him down and anybody else. And we can provide a rich part of education, which is what we're trying to do.
And unless they want to come down and their class size is already full, which messes with the whole choice program.
Yeah,
which
I
is
got
a problem.
But I got a rebuttal for that too, is that we could also increase, we're talking about increasing the size of our classes, which again fits our standards. But we can also add an additional teacher or 2 to make sure that they're not just 1 student and a younger student, as your example says. Like, we can add teachers and provide a really good education for kids if they travel down. And you guys can come at me, I'm good with it.
Well, and the reason you're able to do that is because this board is supporting the Townsend School and giving the resources to the Townsend School. Bottom line, that's what it is. You're getting the resources, you're talking about you have the resources that we don't have.
Yep.
So therefore, you're offering that to this person for her child, saying, you guys don't have those resources, but we do, so you bring your kid on down to Townsend.
I gotcha, right?
Yeah, right.
And I love this debate, again, I love talking about education, I love my job.
I mean,
The-
Jamaica has a village school where, it's school, and it's very vital to the town of Jamaica to have a school.
Okay.
And it, you know.
Just one at a time. I just wanted
Okay,
to-
sure. We are supported by the board, we're supported by the budget, because families in your town have chosen to make a move. And so, as Bill's,
Know what was there.
what?
I'm not sure they knew what was there when the kids went to Jamaica, to Townsend. I mean, that they were being offered something that Jamaica couldn't give them because we didn't have the resources.
No, I think one of the, I believe as a parent, one of the driving factors, and we sort of talked about this last year with Wyndham, is the opportunity of class sizes and additional opportunities that a larger school can provide. And I think that we saw those numbers dipping a little bit. And I think, and there are probably parents in this room who have said, I'm in a school choice to Townsend because it provides different opportunities. The board said, to provide those opportunities, we're going to support you with some additional funding or programs. But.
All right, another hand up.
I'd just like to say, I'm hearing what she's saying, and she's saying we're all in the district.
Yeah.
And so to send my child to your school is great. You've got money from the district, but that's, Jamaica's in the district. And those kids are in the district, and they should be supported too. And I'm not sure I think there are opportunities that a smaller school can do, and maybe they need a little bit more support. Not so, well, you're not getting the support, so we'll send you to Townsend. I'm from Townsend, that's great, but I think we have to remember there are positive things for that little Jamaica school. And this board is supposed to represent them as much as they do Townsend and Newbrook.
Yes.
So, if I.
Yeah.
So I would agree with everything, that the board has allocated resources in an equitable manner. There's just different populations of students, and so different levels of service are given to different levels of populations. But the service is of a similar ratio. So if you have 100 kids and you have a full-time principal, and you have 50 kids and you have a half-time principal, that would be an equivalent ratio. So when you go from 70 kids 2 years ago in Jamaica to a projected 24, there's going to be a difference in the level of service, but that level of service will be similar in a pro rata basis to the other elementary schools.
Go ahead, Patty.
But if you have no idea why those people have taken their kids and gone somewhere else, you cannot change a thing for Jamaica. That needs to be figured out.
Sure.
What was the difference between Townsend and Jamaica? At one time, Jamaica had 105 kids. What was the difference between Townsend and Jamaica that made people from Jamaica want to go to Townsend other than you were a bigger school? You weren't. You wouldn't have been a bigger school. And nobody's bothered to find out what the problems were and why people moved away.
I think gathering data is very valuable.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ken.
The answer to that question is, this is the problem with equity and not being equal. But anyway, can we task later on, when we get to tasks, the superintendent to look into doing a survey in Jamaica so we can get to the root of that problem? Does it sound fair that we can get to that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heidi, I think you're next.
I just want to speak to that for just a second, Patty. Only because we've had an influx of kids and I've had many conversations with families. And I have found two areas that seem to be a reason why people have changed. The convenience to the high school, having their kids all in one location. It just so happens that it's Townsend, that's what Leland Gray is across from. The other one that I've heard multiple times was, my daughter is one of only two, or my son is one of only a couple in his class, and the friend pool is pretty small, and we want to have a bigger classroom size. I don't think it had much to do with the makeup of Jamaica. I feel like they were looking for a place that had more girls in a class, or, you know, coming and combining two creates more options. I think that's probably what we're gonna find, because that's what people have said to me as they've come in and I've chatted with them, and there's some of that. I mean, two schools that are decreasing in size, that don't have as many options for the same grade level, and then the convenience of, well, I have high schoolers, so I'm just gonna bring them there because the bus is gonna go and take my high school kids, so they might as well take my elementary school kid too. I think that's some of it. It just happens that Townsend is what's across from Leland Gray.
Well, let me try to encapsulate everything that we've heard for probably the last 45 minutes or an hour. It seems as though the greatest points of contention are with the first and with the last of these. And Lori, I just wanted to ask again, so with 400,000 in reduction, we would be at a unified tax rate of $2.01, correct?
Yes, after the 6-cent incentive.
Which would imply a 20-cent increase for Jamaica, or 10.83%.
That's correct. Of course, these are all rough numbers because there's a lot of things in flux.
Well, I figured it'd be at 10.83, you'd be spot on, no?
Yeah.
No?
If it
Okay.
changes even to like 10.85, I'm just
Okay. No pressure.
I mean, I think all of the points that have been brought up, both from members of the public as well as here, is that those two in particular would cause the greatest disruption and potentially impact students and decrease equity, which is essentially what we're here for, is to try to have an equitable solution for all students. And if anybody wants to comment on that, I'd love to hear it. But I think, unless we have more discussion, I'd love to entertain a motion to remove those two and apply the $400,000 in reduction.
Actually, we're gonna move 3, remember, the 16,000?
Well, that's.
Don't forget it. Let's
We'll
remove
take
it.
back the 16,000,
Yes, we'll take back, we'll remove the
I think that was
item.
inclusive of the 401,000.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay.
I haven't heard anyone address what Mr. Tebow said about the block scheduling. The difference that he did not seem to think it was a very good idea.
Apologies. What I meant by the last one, that was the one.
Oh, that was the
Yeah,
one.
yeah. So the first one in our list, and then the last one, which is the going to an 8-day period. You're absolutely correct.
And how do we study that?
Well, they started a study.
You already started?
We have a committee working on it currently.
It's not gonna be one of those committees like when we did the committee of 6 with the 2 superintendents go into a room and figure out they can't cut a superintendent?
I was
Just
not
like
one of
that.
those 2
Just like
superintendents.
You weren't, no, you weren't.
I
in
was
on
not.
that. You were not in on that. It was actually the year before you became the superintendent.
That's right.
I remember it well.
Yes, sir.
Do we know what the total increase to the budget is? We're talking about these as decreases, and in fact, we're not decreasing the budget at all.
Can you speak up? I can't hear you.
Yeah, so we're talking about these as decreases to the budget, and these are not decreases. What is the total increase to the budget that we're talking about right now?
Great point.
With the removal of the 401, 462.
We're just increasing it less.
Yes. If I had to guess, it'd be around 3%. I don't know.
330 increase is my guess, right? 3%?
Employees was in it.
Because 11.7. I'm gonna go 2.89.
401, 461.
I'm sorry, say it again?
401, 461 is the increase from, oh no, I'm sorry.
The decrease.
Hold, please. That was the decrease. You're right. You're talking about the year over year, right, Drew?
Correct.
Yeah,
Is that what
it's
you're
total
talking
increase to the budget.
2.94.
about? Sorry.
2.9.
I'm gonna have the math brain like Bill.
3.5.
So the year over year would be 337,649.
And percentage-wise?
Yeah.
300 and what?
337.
337?
I think you're right. You're spot on.
I'm going 2.93.
I'm going 2.97.
What's the over?
All right. You can go on and I'll come back to you.
Well, actually, I have a question for Bill following up on
Sorry, one at a
student.
time. Go ahead.
At the WCSU level,
Yes.
and it happens every year when we bring up the budget, and we're talking about special ed and everything else, and we talk about meeting the kids' needs. I've brought up to Stephanie every time about, don't forget about the kids that are ahead of the curve. And whose job is it to make sure those kids are challenged?
Well, I think you're echoing the point.
Right, so
Parent over there.
how do we do that? Because we need to do that. Every child must be challenged. You know, that's how we do it.
It is an area in which we can grow without adding a position, I think we can do that.
Because there was we've discussed this in the past, I know we have, that we don't just stop at, okay,
Oh.
everybody made the mark. No,
I
you're
am
still
confident
challenged.
that is going on in a variety of places, but I couldn't give you a report in a systematic way, but I
Right.
think what you're asking for is something to that nature.
Yes.
Yes.
We should talk about that when we talk about the continuous improvement plans in a minute.
Right.
Or several minutes, as the case may be.
So speaking of which,
No, we used to do that.
I'd be glad to entertain that motion
We
again.
actually had a person.
Yeah, I had that too.
But actually, let's
Right.
wait for Lori to come out with the magic number.
2.88.
Oh,
Was he close?
he said 2.9.
He was wrong, that's all.
I was hedging. My first one was 2.89, then I hedged to 2.93.
You said 3.5, so.
You're too close, you keep hearing my whispers.
So 201 and Newfane and Brookline rates right now are 188.5 and Townsend is 195, correct?
Correct.
No chance that Townsend would lose that 5% protection.
So there always is a chance. I can't, basically, these are the factors. Let me read the factors that still haven't worked into these tax rates. So before you plan your, what check you're gonna write to the town. I don't know what the commissioner's gonna do with the yield, right? The yield is most likely always changes, typically before town meeting day. So if the yield goes up, tax rates go down. That puts everybody at risk, mainly Townsend, not so much Brookline and Newfane, at losing the 5% incentive protection. The other factors are how the AOE calculates the tax rate based on the split. So remember, we haven't split the budget yet, right? This is the pre-K through 12 budget that we're looking at right here. But West River actually is West River A and West River B. So when all of that goes up to the state and creates a tax rate for West River A and it creates a tax rate for West River B. And those are combined. So last year, just to give you some idea, I think I projected a tax rate of $1.90 roughly, and it came in at $1.88 or $1.86. So once the combination happened, there was a little bit of a change there. The equalized pupils are not finalized. If the equalized pupils go up, tax rates go down. If they go down, tax rate goes up. And then the last one that I can identify is the AOE. Also, I've identified some exclusions to the penalty, which is about $706 per student. And there is all other exclusions out there that could impact that as well. If we add to the exclusions, then the tax rate will go down. So if the tax rate drops for any reason below $1.95, then Townsend loses the protection. So still a ways off. Game
We
isn't
would lose
finished
the
yet.
protection, but then we would have that rate.
You would have that rate, so if
We-
the tax rate went down, so let me, for instance, if you were to cut all $538,000 out of this budget, and the yield went up to $11,000, we'll say, okay? That would drop the tax rate to the unified tax rate, again, I'm projecting because we haven't split it yet, to $1.94, okay? So that $1.94 is below the $1.95, so that would become Townsend's tax rate, $1.94, and they would lose the protection. So next year, they would not have any protection. So if the budget goes way up, you know, you start increasing, adding some of these things back in or whatever, the building stuff, any of that, then Townsend would continue, just like Jamaica has, to increase beyond the protection. Does that make sense to everybody?
Formula is super clear.
Yeah, well, this adds a complete layer of complexity that is beyond.
Essentially, tell me if I'm wrong, Larry, but the same thing could happen that happened to Jamaica, where, you know, we have a budget that goes up 6%, but by some crazy formula up at the state level, 1 + 1 = 3, and now all of a sudden you're at a 19% tax increase, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and as I explained last time, Jamaica's CLA, which is playing into this as well, has continued to decrease. So I think it was 5 years ago, I have that in my file. I think it was like over 100%, 103 or 4%, and it's continued to go down every year, which makes your tax rate go up, with nothing to do with expenses, nothing to do with the school budget. I mean, it has something to do with it, but it doesn't have a direct correlation to it. So, right, not because of it.
So it kind of sounds like 400,000 is a good call for a number of reasons. It kind of puts us in a sweet spot where Townsend's slightly protected. And you may also see a several cent decrease anyway with some of the other factors with the yield, et cetera. And it solves some of the problems in terms of making sure that our students are served and it's less disruptive. Is that fair?
So what's that bottom line number, and does anybody want to make a motion?
Lori, what would that reduction be? 401,000 and,
Do you want the total, but the total?
or I'm sorry, we would. Do we want to make a motion in what the total increase in budget would be?
So,
Based on,
do you want me to give you the number first?
Sure,
And then
please.
we can
Yep.
talk about it? So if you decrease the $401,000 and change, it would bring the budget in at $12,047,731.
2.88?
2.88.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna make your motion, Al. To make the motion, are we ready?
Yes, I believe we are. I mean, we can discuss it afterwards, sure.
Okay. So I guess the motion would be to accept the document, accept what was been presented, removing the first one, removing the 16,000, and the last one. So we're talking about a budget increase for the year of $337,649, which is about 2.88%, and a total budget of $12,047,731.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Oh, I forgot you were there, Joe.
You're there, Joe. How many was that? 5?
Can I just get a show of hands for that?
I can't show you my hand.
We got it.
You got it.
I'm waving it.
You
better not be fibbing.
Not in favor? Any not in favor?
Fine. I'm not thrilled, it's over the COLA. I'm not thrilled.
I knew you were gonna say COLA, all right.
All right, as long as you know.
But we have to have it for the record. Are you yes, no, or abstain?
Okay. You want to know? You got to know.
Okay.
Okay, you asked for it, you got it. If it's above the COLA, I don't approve of budget.
That's what we love about you, Ken, is you're very consistent.
Yes.
All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Moving on to continuous improvement plan.
So you guys got all these in your packets. There's additional copies on the round table. Each school, building, and principal has gone through a process to get to a school improvement plan, which is a living document for 3 years. We received a 7-month extension up until January of 2020. These were due in August, and they allowed us, or 6 months, to have a 6-month extension through January, so that it was a true representation of what was going on in the buildings. I don't know if the principals want to speak a little bit to each one of their process or where they're at for the benefit of the board. I know the board had it 48 hours in advance, but it's a lot of paper, it's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms. So I think it might be helpful, you know, a nice 60 to 90 second from each principal about what's your goals, what you're trying to accomplish. What does the CIP do for your kids?
60 to 90 seconds.
Well, I'm not running the meeting,
All right, we'll give you 3 minutes.
Well, let Scotty go first.
Well, that was kind.
I can go.
No, I'll go. So, we did a lot of this work as a large group, and it was modeled to us by Jen McCusick, our curriculum coordinator, who has a lot of experience in action planning. Our action plan at my school comes down very similarly in that it's got 4 goals. The first of which is around math, and the big change in my math goal is that I really want to adopt the strategy that they have adopted under Craig's leadership at Townsend, the math workshop model. It's in place in many of my classrooms, but I really want to see that fully in use. But again, we're using a specific curriculum, Engage New York, and we want to follow through and make sure that that is continuing as well, and all of our assessing that we're doing is turning around and informing instruction. Our second goal is safe and healthy schools. That's a mandate that you have a safe and healthy school goal. We have been working, we've done a lot of work on the SU level in terms of being trauma informed and making trauma-based decisions, especially when it comes to discipline. At my specific school, we use positive behavior intervention and supports, which is also part of our safe and healthy school goal. Our third goal is around using text from your reading, using evidence from your reading in order to support an opinion or a thesis when you're writing. And that is an ELA goal that we've had in place. It really matches with the assessments that we're doing at the end of the year, the summative assessments. And finally, because my school did not close the gap sufficiently between children in poverty and those that and the general population, we were required to do an equity goal, which we really put together all the things that we're currently doing and enumerated them. I don't think any of this was an addition. Quite honestly, there's really no way, since it's illegal to identify a child in poverty formally, because you're not allowed to share that kind of information. There'd be no way of closing that gap without just doing things universally and by parent choice. And so that's where my CIP landed. I'm very excited about it. I think that I worked very hard on it, and I'm really proud of the way it turned out.
I'll follow up on that. Yeah, my CIP looks similar to Scotty's. We have 3 goals, one addressing mathematics, the other one English language arts, and the last one is safe and healthy schools. Our ELA and math goals are very similar, which is to increase the capacity in teaching instruction of our teachers, giving Tier 1 instruction, being supported by the academic support team to increase skills, then to perform them on our LCAS. And then our safe and healthy schools goal, the biggest thing that we've done this year and moving forward is we adopted a new social emotional learning program called Choose Love. And we are starting the process of investigating Scotty's program of PBIS down at Townsend School to increase student climate and our MTSS month.
Sure, we'll keep all the elementaries together. I was very challenged by this. I have not had the opportunity to do this in this way before. Obviously, I've had to set state goals for many, many years, but in a very different format. I did a great deal of examination of the data at Jamaica Village School, and one of the things that I've continually shared is that, and I believe I shared it with all of you in the fall, was the fact that well over 46% of our students are not proficient or advanced, and that's just not acceptable. And so I started to look at instructional practices. One of the advantages of the small school is I can get in those classrooms a lot, even on the short days that I'm there. And so we have, in working with Dr. McCusick, we have identified 2 goals for Jamaica. One is very similar to what the other 2 elementary schools are working on. This is looking at reading and writing in a workshop approach. I've had a great deal of experience with professional development on that, so it will be pretty efficient to be able to implement that in a fairly expedient manner. The other goal is a safe and healthy school, and that one I struggled a little bit to combine that with the academics. And what we decided to do was really look at personalized learning plans and goal setting for every single one of our students in the areas of reading and math. And I believe that that helps to address the one community member that spoke about, one of the board members that spoke about acceleration and enrichment. And because Vermont does not require a gifted and talented program here, this is one way by using a workshop approach and setting personalized goals, particularly in reading and writing, that can allow kids and teachers to work together to move at their own rate rather than a static, I'm in 3rd grade, so this is the only thing I can do. And so we'll be able to look through and do that. That will take a little bit longer to implement, but I think using that in combination with a workshop approach will move our kiddos in that direction.
All right, before I jump into mine, a couple other things to mention that all of us had to do to collect data points is that we all participated, and you guys I'm sure received some of these as well. Full surveys of students for age appropriate levels, parents and staff that we collected last spring. That data gets into the hopper with our teams that are doing this work as well to look at that, as well as the student data that Pam referenced. I'm not sure exactly how these guys do it in some of the smaller schools where the teams of teachers are the entire staff. For us, we have a teacher leadership group that did that analysis, and we spent the entire day breaking down all that data, including another survey we did around a self-assessment that we did based on the NEASC standards as part of a process that Bill and Jen and I were having this discussion around NEASC, which is a whole other thing we'll come back to at a later date. But, so we collected a bunch of data there as well. Our first goal was to, as you can see, to create and fully implement the PBGR system for all students by the fall of 2022. We know that is later than what the state had set as the initial date, but we also started later. So, there's a lot of steps involved, as you can see on the next page around some of those change ideas. Sort of lays out a little bit of a timeline of how we do that work. In fact, we have a team of people going to a workshop next week after, I think, to get some further information on that implementation piece. Our second one, the Safe Healthy Schools, was to fully implement the MTSS system. That sort of fits under the umbrella of what the WCSU SIP is doing, and really making sure that our staff is fully understanding the multi-tiered approach to instruction and how we're fully supporting kids. The third one, as Scotty mentioned, Newbrook and Leland Gray are the two that were identified as equity schools, which, as we joked, sounds like it should be a good thing that you're an equity school, but it turns out that that's not a good thing, that there's a lack of equity. And so one of the things that we talked about, when there had been a student survey that Joanna had done around the culture and climate, I think some of that data was maybe shared with you guys. We really analyzed that data, and the student council dug into it and shared some of that stuff with the staff, and that led to this third goal of 100% of students feel a sense of belonging within our positive and supportive community. We felt that a lot of kids felt like they were part of a community for different reasons, and the reasons were different from middle to high school. But anyway, so that's where we are involving some of the steps there, and that was our last, that was it. That was our first one.
Thank you. Wow, very concise. You guys beat the 3 minutes.
So for compliance sake, I do need the board to make a motion to approve and list the individual schools so that it can be in the minutes. I have to attach that to our grant proposals.
And before you do that, actually, Bill, the vote piece too, maybe got mentioned earlier, but the staffs fully vote to support these as well. So each one of our staffs held a vote to have a formal.
And yep, and our PACs did as well. So the principal advisory committees all met, I believe, and they've all.
We didn't vote, but we shared it with them.
Yep. They endorsed what that means.
So.
Excellent.
Yep.
Who would like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept, is that what we're going to say? Approve.
The continuous improvement plan for
Leland and Gray, Newbrook, Townsend, and Jamaica.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aaron, you got that?
Sweet.
Aye.
Delayed aye.
Voice speaks.
Well, I gotta take you off mute.
Oh.
I figure you guys don't want to hear me like just sitting here.
All right, on to the student reports.
I have nothing to report, personally.
Fair enough.
In a meeting that we had with Mr. Tebow, he asked us, as part of our independent study, to do a presentation for the board at the end of the school year. So we were wondering what the board would like us to report about.
So this is a culmination. What they're doing with me is a credited course on school governance. And their part of their experience obviously is coming to the meetings and participating on committees like they have been, and part of it is meeting with me every other week as well to like debrief what happens in these meetings and to prepare them for the next one, and also talk about school governance in general. So anything that would relate to them demonstrating knowledge around that would be, maybe they can explain the funding formula or something like that. Just kidding, guys.
No, that's PhD.
That's PhD level. So whatever you guys think would be valuable for them to dig in a little deeper on for some learning, and then also share out their learning with you guys.
I think it's great to hear how you understand how the board works, how it relates to the different towns, how each representative is supposed to play their role. But I'd also like to hear what you think students want the board to know.
Okay.
Great point. Okay.
Is that it?
That's a great one.
Oh, Drew?
I'd like to know what programs the students feel are most important, or what programs they would benefit from most that maybe aren't here or should be here.
You'd verify that they aren't allowed to test me doing a survey.
No, we are not. We are
Feel
not.
free to task the principal with anything. I'll make that as a motion.
So we're talking about programs that don't exist that
If
we
there's a-
think.
Maybe, if there's.
Or more of, or
Changing, maybe like the program for students being on the board and meeting with the principal is really good, or maybe it's really bad.
Depends on the day, Drew.
What programs are missing, or what programs are good that we should support? Because we're going to have tough budget discussions in future years, and knowing what the students value is important.
I can tell you right now that like I think the biggest program the students value is definitely sports. Like definitely sports. So I would continue going forward with full support of that as much as you can, within reason.
If that was true, we would have 100% participation in sports. So we can't say every student.
But just because someone doesn't play doesn't mean they don't participate.
There are
Or don't go to all the games.
Yeah, there were during soccer season and basketball season. There were a lot of students at our games.
Okay, I agree with a lot, definitely.
Less so the middle schoolers, more so the high schoolers, but still.
Good.
Anybody else? Joe?
No, I'm the part about the student programming that they find important. That's a tough one because it's like I when I was thinking about this report, I think it really, the value for the board is in the experience that these particular students had, rather than is this a poll? Is it they talk to their friends? Is it a personal opinion? I think this is the most valuable program. I'd sort of like to hear, the recap of the year too. Like, when you first got on the board, what did you expect? And after being on it for a year, what was different than you thought, or how does it, how did the actual sitting on the board compare with your expectations? That kind of thing. So the personal growth part, or the progression anyway.
That's good. Anybody else? Is that enough for you?
Yeah. We'll get it done.
No, load them up.
Everybody.
Perfect. All right, principal reports. I think everybody read the principal reports, but if you guys want to, same style, do a 1-minute recap of anything that you want to highlight.
I would like to highlight again, and I already kind of got into it, but I'm really proud to see that what I thought was happening at Newbrook is in fact happening. We have fewer incidents to report out of our Swiss incident database, and I really believe that's because instead of, we've always been very educational with our consequences and with my discipline, but I'm the principal and I'm one guy, and I try to do a really good job with everybody, but that's not a system, that's a person. And now we have this system in place that's informed by experts, Beth Merrill and our behaviorist, Jen Ather. And what we're finding is that we have one child every day who's not getting written up that in the past has. And that is an amazing thing to me, because when I think about what that means, and I didn't break it down for today, which I should have, but when you think about a referral, that's going to take an hour maybe out of class time for this child sometimes, right? So here's a kid that's struggling with their behavior, and probably because of that, compounding the time out of class, he's struggling with his academics. And here we are now saving one child every day of an hour of time. It's an amazing thing. And I have to say too that I wasn't like all for it at the beginning of the year. I was like, gosh, I hope this works. And it's working like a charm. And that really was because Stephanie, our special ed director, really pushed us in that direction. And I'm so pleased with how it's worked, and all the staff has stepped up, and people are pretty jazzed about it. There's just, the kids we're teaching them how to behave, and they're learning how to behave better. And that's an amazing thing, and I'm just really proud.
Oh, I can jump off on that. Yeah, this past month of January opens sort of when we return from the holiday break. Starts our benchmarking period. And so I'm really proud of my teachers. They got all of their benchmarking done for our LCAS, which is pretty heavy depending on which grade that you're in. From getting all of that data this past week, I met with special educators and my academic support team to review all the data. We then looked at our notes, we looked at the data, we looked at students to make recommendations for our WIN block, which is our what I need blocks that we have in every classroom for a half hour a day, which specifically targets skills that students may be missing. I then took those notes with the special educator and my academic support team, and then we met for an hour with each one of our teachers to specifically talk about each one of the students and the data that they showed us on these assessments. We then formulated a plan for the next 6 to 8 weeks of how we could do targeted instruction. So, you know, we went through our 112 kids and talked about what kids knew, what they didn't know, how we can help them out, and how we can help support them, which again, sort of like falls into what you were talking about. When kids are engaged and are at the level where they should be at and feel comfortable, they actually behave and are more engaged because they're comfortable where they are. So really proud of that.
I will just say on mine, nothing highlights, but I wonder if anybody had questions based on my report, or I think Chris Medina had an incident report in there about the...
That just went to the building committee.
Oh, that's it, okay. So people had any questions about the incident here with us closing early for vacation? I'd be happy to answer any questions people had about that, or if you felt like you knew enough about it or wanted to know more, I'm happy to help answer some of those questions. If you feel like you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, what was the toxicity level of the air?
Now, the air quality was not measured because the Department of Health told us unless we had a baseline measurement, there was no reason, there's nothing to compare to, so it didn't really matter. So they recommended just letting the sediment
It was just stuffier
settle,
than normal.
settle, and then clean, which is what we did. So.
I just have a few highlights as my other two colleagues have shared. Our benchmarking for the winter has been completed. We actually, ironically, have a data meeting tomorrow morning. I have looked at the data. There are some really nice highlights in that data, and there's some areas to work on. And just a couple other things to point out. We recently have forged a partnership with Jamaica Memorial Library, the public library, and there are 4 opportunities. We actually have our last one this Thursday, where the children go for an after-school literacy enrichment program on Thursday afternoons for about an hour and a half, and we've had 5 kids sign up for that. So percentage-wise, that's pretty good for Jamaica, and we look to continue that. It's great, the bus drops them off, so it's perfect, and it helps to provide some of that after-school program as well without having to go to Wardsboro and that kind of thing. And then if you didn't notice, and I know it was in the newspaper in a few different situations, we had a fairly sizable grant from the Stratton Foundation, and we collaborated with LL Bean and were able to purchase backpacks for all of our children for the second half of the year. So that was thanks to Susan Clark for arranging that and the Stratton Foundation.
Johanna, do you want to give some highlights from the very nice and thorough culture and climate report?
I see that it didn't make the packet, but I know you have it electronically.
They do
so
have
that's
it.
fine. It's also many pages long, so it's quite all right. Yes, so the presentation that was included in the email that you all got was put together by the high school leadership class. So we rolled out the official Rebel Code, so the students defined what the Rebel Code or the sort of behavioral expectations school-wide, what those should be. I would have brought my little poster if I thought of it, but I didn't think of it. But it's very lovely and colorful. It says Rebels, and then the R stands for respect. So they've defined what respect stands for. They've defined what the E stands for. And those will be going around to the classrooms, just creating a common language for teachers and all staff and students to be using with each other. So that's exciting. Presented to the staff today, got the posters out. So I've also begun sort of looking into establishing more restorative practice ideas here at Leland and Gray in terms of behavioral consequences, but also just for community based practices. And to help with that, I've decided to create a culture and climate team. I've had, I think, 4 or 5 teachers already say that they're interested in joining in that. So we'll begin looking at what that process would be to bring more of restorative practice, restorative justice to our school, and perhaps like a hybrid with traditional consequences and a blend of all these things. What else was in my report? I think those are some good highlights.
Good. I have to do one question though.
Okay.
Did Bob fall after he tried to take that shot?
Which shot?
You're playing soccer and.
No, but I
No.
also missed the
Oh,
crossbar.
the crossbar
You did?
challenge.
The crossbar, yeah. It was bad. Soccer is not my game.
Did it leave the, I don't know if the ball left the ground.
I might have missed it.
I don't know.
Well done. Little divot.
All right, how about the superintendent report, everybody?
Just the two things, just the weighting study. I appreciate that the officers of the WCSU are gathering you all for that conversation. And at the January Superintendent's Association, the Secretary of Education came to visit and let us know two things that will probably have an effect on this area. One is that there'll be a final report from Act 46 by the AOE, which will come out late spring, just basically detailing out the logistics of what happened after Act 46 passed. And then immediately after that report, the Secretary of Education is planning to work with the State Board of Education to redraw supervisory union boundaries. There's no law or statute that needs to be changed that has been on the books for 50 years. And so that seems to be one of the top priorities of the agency this summer. And so I included in your packet pages 187 and 188 of the Secretary of Education's report, which has Wyndham Central in there 3 or 4 different times of different possibilities and different configurations. So I would expect this summer, before an election, that all to be analyzed and dictated to. I do not see a lot of conversation. I think that's been thought about for a long period of time. I think the Secretary of Education, before he became the Secretary of Education, was hired as a consultant to do many of the studies. So he has a really good handle on the situation. And I think that with declining enrollment, SU boundary consolidation is a very natural thing that will be occurring over the next 1 to 10 years.
Bill,
So-
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this report that you send us, those pages, is like a couple years old. But, you know, some of the things in there just make very little sense to me, you know, so like when they propose, you know, possibly putting Vernon into RSU, you know, like, okay, Winhall makes a lot more sense to me than Vernon does. But do you have any idea or sense of how are they gonna come up with some better strategies this time, or are they going to at least be open to that? Because like what we just saw in these last few meetings is we have one town in our district and they're feeling like they don't have adequate representation or that their needs aren't being adequately met. Sure. And I can't imagine a room full of people from Vernon coming up here and thinking that they're going to get a fair shake.
So think about this contextually. When you are part of a supervisory union, your relationship to another district is very different than when you're within a union district. Okay. So the relationship between Townsend and Jamaica and Newfane and Brookline and Wyndham are all very coalesced because you all are a member of a district.
Gotcha.
But you guys really don't have too much effect either way of what Marlboro's doing or what Stratton decides to do, or what Dover and Wardsboro are making their choices on. So if you enlarge an SU and add Vernon, it allows Brattleboro to become a single district. They are no longer a supervisory union. Mm-hmm. So there's some efficiencies there. The secretary really doesn't care if the superintendent goes to another meeting and is responsible for another, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those are going to be some natural things that happen. The idea of merging like districts is done. Those are all now voluntary. So Act 46 in that way is done. So in terms of having more districts underneath a supervisory union, underneath one business office, now that we have a chart of accounts, now that we have one finance system, it makes sense. It makes absolute sense. So, I think what you just mentioned is a really distinct possibility. And I think what we're going to do is just focus on students and focus on our service to our boards, and whatever will be, will be. There'll be I laugh, but there'll be the Hunger Games of superintendents and supervisory unions, just like there's going to be Hunger Games of principals and there's going to be Hunger Games of teachers. When you have declining enrollment, reorganization will occur, but the easiest and quickest lever that the State Board of Education has now that's currently in statute is SU boundaries. So I feel very confident that you're going to see a lot of movement.
action.
Yeah.
And you think we can save more than 6 figures?
I am committing nothing. Have learned that.
You learned that one, right?
So what was the study you were just referencing before you talked about?
Sure. The Agency of Education on June 30th, 2018. So it's the final report. If you type in the final report, Secretary of Education under Act 46, you will see there's 2 pages of all the different suggestions of how to reorganize SUs, predominantly down in the south and predominantly up in the north.
I have a question for the board, if this is the appropriate time. Lindsay forwarded me the pupil weighting factors report. Has everyone seen that report? And in this, I think it's really, for me as an individual that lives in this area, I think it's important for me to talk to the state about how I feel that they need to look at this report and really change the way they look at funding. Is that something, but I also feel that it's really important for institutions to do that as well, not just individuals and taxpayers in the state. And I was wondering if the board has taken a look at this, and if the board would be willing to, as an institution, say, we would like you to take a look at how education is funded and that it's really important that the pupil weighting be changed. Because I think we have a benefit that we are a very small state and we have very few people, and so our voices matter. But I also think our institutions also matter, and I think it would be really helpful if the board feels the same way I do about that we need to be more equitable in the way we fund education, that the board could also voice to our representatives that this change needs to happen.
That will be part of the meeting that we have on the 10th, February 10th, with the weighting study.
Okay.
And yeah, there's certainly the potential that we would actually have our chair speak at the state level in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there going to be a presentation to explain that study on February 10th, or?
So Leanne was at the one on Saturday, but those 3 out of the 4 are all members of the board. And the expectation is that information that was brought on Saturday to explain it all will be tightened down for the WCSU group.
I was wondering about if that was recorded on Saturday, if anybody had a link or anything that if you wanted to watch it after the fact.
I don't think BCT.
There was no digital recording. Several reporters there, so best I can suggest would be to look and sure there'll be some articles coming out. I remember seeing Olga Peters there, and I know there was mentioning of other press members I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, there will be a lot more about this. I mean, this is a huge study and a huge game changer. Yeah, that's.
The bottom line, personally, if you don't mind,
No, go ahead.
that I took from it is we need individuals to act, letter writings, and I can give, forgot my phone today, so I don't have all my notes from that meeting. But they gave key people to target. For the House, it was the education as well as Ways and Means, because they make a lot of the financial decisions. Your Speaker, Senate as well, similar positions. The more personal, how it's personally impacted you, loss of programming at local schools, tax burden that maybe was unnecessary to provide the minimal course of study that we've been able to provide. Just anything personalized is what the representatives were urging.
Great. Good question. All right, moving on to administration assignment for next meeting. Ken, I know you have one.
Yeah.
Here's your chance.
All right. Forgot what it was.
School choice.
You didn't write it.
Survey. Survey.
The survey of school choice.
So is this, just clarification, this is reaching out to all families that took advantage of school choice last year and asking one question: why did you go?
Yes.
Okay.
What were the driving reasons for you to change school district or schools in the district? If you want to put choices down, it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be like 30 families, so I mean,
Right.
I would let them talk, and then I can just give you the
Right,
raw,
yeah.
and then I can give you a synthesis.
Sounds fine.
That sounds good.
You got handle it, but.
Yeah, I guess, no, I just have a question.
I don't know who was first, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering about that survey, and because I know Ken, you talked about giving choices, or whether you wanted a paragraph, and then we can just like go through the data. Would it be easier for us to just have like a drop-down menu of class size, offering, rather than going through a paragraph?
I can do
check boxes.
Whatever the board wants me to do.
I think that assumes that we know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what
I'd
we
like to
thought.
hear him talk.
Okay.
Rick was next, I believe.
I'm going to make a comment based on observations, just since you're pursuing this. I've been coming to meetings for quite a while. What I heard tonight, when it comes to school choice, apologies to Jamaica, was buyer's remorse. During the whole presentation of why this district is going to be so great, school choice, you're going to get school choice. Everybody was, oh great, school choice. Okay, so that helped sell it. And then when Bill and his staff came up with a wonderful plan for reconfiguring the schools, the people that came to the meeting sat there and went, well, what about school choice? So you can study it all you want, but people got what they wanted. Now they discover they didn't want it. And the demise in the population in Jamaica, it may be a result of that choice, but once again, you have to deal with equity. Because if you put more resources into Jamaica, because it's small, then you're stealing resources from the rest of them. So, you know, this is, buyer's remorse is the only thing I could come up with. Is I voted for this, now I regret it. And this is easy for me to say because I voted no.
I think it would be more helpful to ask everyone why they did or did not choose choice, just to see if it's buyer's remorse, or if, to see how people are liking school choice, whether they like it or don't, why they chose to do it, why they didn't choose to do it, and what they would like, how they would like to see this evolve, because I don't think it's a yes or no, like we have school choice or we don't have school choice. How would we like this to evolve? There are other school districts that are making different schools have different focuses. There's one school that's focused on STEM. There's one school, elementary school focused on arts. Like, there's different ways that school choice can configure outside of just convenience, that many people are moving to Townsend perhaps because it's close to Leland and Gray and it's easier to, on your way to work, right? So I think it would be helpful to do a more comprehensive study of like, how is school choice going, and just to get more input rather than those that chose to do it.
So you're saying expand it beyond those that actually made the active choice of moving to another school?
What would be the harm in sending a survey to all of the parents and the families and saying, you know, you would then have you could break down the data, like if you say yes, you could look at the people that did school choice, what did they say? The people that didn't do choice, what did they say? And then people's thoughts on it. If you want people's input, ask everyone.
Go ahead, Mike.
Not to go too far into the weeds here, Bill, but I wonder if even at the initial 10,000 foot level, if we ask just a second question, if you did choice to another school, was it, you know, are you happy with that choice?
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I guess one of the things we still don't know, And based on what Rick said, buyer's remorse, there could be, for all we know, there could be 10 people who want a choice back to Jamaica. And how does that affect everything for next year? It's certainly worth knowing.
So could you frame it, to have the two questions, the first one being to everybody, and then the second one distilling it down to
Right.
those that just made
Those who took
the active
who took
choice?
advantage of it.
Ken, is that agreeable to you? Do you want to-
I'm fine with whatever, however I'm just setting the task to the administration. The administration can figure it out and be devil's advocate. I'm fine with that.
Could I?
Yes.
Just so that I wouldn't be flying blind, I'm happy to take on the task. Could I share whatever draft I come up with the policy committee that developed the school choice policy and recommended it to the board, so I could have a different set of eyes?
Sure.
And then once I get that approval, then deploy it, something like that, so
Happy
that
to
I
do
could make
that.
sure that it's representative of what the board was looking for?
Do you think it would be helpful, Bill, to ask, I mean, because right now we're trying to make these choices about staffing and all these other things. We've got all of this information that we don't have. Is it too early for us to ask families what they're planning on, what they're planning on doing for next year?
Well, we're gonna do that in March.
Is this going to happen before? Is this survey going to happen?
Well, if the board gives me permission to go through the policy people, then I'm gonna start working on this
Yeah.
week.
So I
I would
wonder
like
if
to get it
maybe-
out before that.
Yeah.
I'd like to report back to the board on the 24th with,
Data.
you know, you guys will be able to connect with all your parents. We'll give them a certain deadline, and we can analyze the data.
Nice.
So maybe one of the follow-up questions could be, are you considering choice in the future?
Correct.
Whether from wherever you're at. And that would,
Yeah. I'll design something and send it to you guys.
that would help with the, are you happy with where you're at question?
Yeah.
And then we can just set up a meeting and all meet.
I'll just send it to you digitally.
Yeah.
I'll get the okay of all of you. And then you guys can edit.
Okay.
That's a
Everybody
good
good
task.
with that? Any other tasks this time? Joe, Trish has got one.
So this is not for now.
Thank God.
Just something to think about that I kind of came up with after our last meeting. I mean, I don't know how many times Lori explains how to figure out the tax rate. I still don't know. I understand it. I'm sure that nobody else in this room besides Lori could actually do it. It would be amazing, you know, when we were not one large unit like we are now, people could go to their individual town meetings or school board meetings and say, darn it, why is this happening? You could really get a one-on-one, probably more individualized explanation of that, whereas now it's a little bit larger. Wouldn't it be great if in time, after budget season, not now, not when we're dealing with all this, but to have some kind of a one sheet that's available at every town hall and/or large-size poster that just says, this is how it's done. I understand that it is not that easy. I completely realize that. But maybe there's a way that we could kind of come up with, this is sort of A to B, B to C, C to D, A, D, B, you know. Something so that taxpayers can educate themselves instead of coming into this meeting and going, oh my gosh, I'm so angry, why is this happening? So that they can just go, oh. So the work of this board makes an impact here, but not necessarily here. Just so that because I get it, people are frustrated, they don't understand how it works, and this is their outlet. And it would be great if we were able to sort of have a little bit of symbiosis and say, this is why.
Can I just respond to what's out there now? So I think for the last couple of years, I've done a presentation at the budget meeting, which basically walks everybody through it. And those presentations are all up on the WRED board. So that's one way that the public could educate themselves. There's also videos that I have sent both to the board, and I can have them posted as well. There's a couple of different videos that the state has put out. That one is very simplified and walks people through it, and they just have to take the time to watch it. And then the one I sent to the board, I don't know, did anybody watch it? You did? Nice. It was about an hour long, right?
That's my
Yeah. Was very informative, and actually, that that one is a little more complicated, probably something for the board to watch, to understand it better so that they can talk to their constituents about it. I'm happy to do whatever you want, but there is a lot of information out there.
Right.
And I know myself, I've tried to make it as simple as possible, and through the presentation that I've done.
And you do a wonderful job.
So I just don't know how much more I can do.
Sure.
But I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do. Just-
Maybe it's once a year or twice a year, we have just a board meeting this is how this is done. If you're interested, this is how this is done.
Like pre-budget.
Right.
Pre-budget, yeah.
I'm just saying, just to help the public familiarize and inform themselves. That's all I'm saying.
It's a great question.
If nobody likes that idea, it's just
No,
something I
it's a
thought
great,
about.
no, it's a great question. And Trish, Lori, sorry. There's been a one-pager in the past, I think I know it. So basically just taking, all right, here's the total dollar amount of the budget, and then just all of those lines below it.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom.
So that's basically
Like
what I built my.
It's on the 3-year comparison.
Right, it's called the 3-year comparison. It's complicated for West River though, because there's the West River A and there's the West River B.
Right.
So, it's for somebody who's just looking at this, it doesn't make sense that there's an A and a B, number one.
Right.
And number two, you have to add them, there's a percentage calculation you have to do to get to the unified tax rate. So that 3-year comparison is good, and that's what I have built my presentations basically off of. I'm happy to do the presentation as many times as people want to see it. I really want people to understand what they're voting on and what their tax rate is. So that's always been my goal. So happy to do it.
And you do a great job.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that, Lori, if we could have something like that where it just starts at the top on the 3-year comparison.
Yep.
If I don't have it in front of me, but that bottom number and then just everything below it, and with like a little brief explanation, narration of the.
Can I send the board my presentation from
Yeah.
last year so you guys can look at it?
Which I think is
And
probably.
give me feedback as to where it's not
Yeah.
self-explanatory or easy to grasp.
Yeah.
Would that be helpful? Then at least we have a starting point
Yeah.
there? Okay.
Lori, could you also send us that hour-long video? I would like to put that on my Facebook page at school, because we've had a lot of questions.
He's not gonna watch it.
There's
I can't explain it.
Let's be clear here, yes.
There's a short one that, and I think it was actually targeted towards boards, wasn't it, Lori? There's this short one, it's easy to understand.
There was, it was very cartoonish.
Yeah, it was a cartoon, literally.
Right, and that one is very good. The hour-long one actually goes into more in-depth and really explains it from how, all the towns send their money to the state and how that works. So it's informative, but it may not be for everybody to watch. But I will send that to you.
Thank you
Who's first?
very much. It's for me and my parents.
So tonight there's been a lot of negative talk about Jamaica, but I do want to say before we end that we have a wonderful school. Pam is doing an excellent job. And we have, the advisory group is working with Pam, and we are coming up with some really neat ideas. And we've got mountain biking that's coming in, we've got a whole gardening program coming in. We're talking about opening up the school at 7:15 in the morning for parents, and we're thinking about after-school programs and things like that. So we really are making school good. And we have wonderful teachers, and kids and the parents are great too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just saying, it would be really helpful to also educate the people that are, when I went to go vote on the budget, the person's like, here are the 2 different budgets. And I was like, they're not actually 2 separate budgets, they're 2 parts of the same budget. And she was the one that was handing the ballots to people. So it would be really helpful to inform the volunteers that are giving information about what you're voting on.
We have to be very, very, very careful about our communication to elected officials by having any sort of opinions about
but they were.
I agree.
Yes.
It would be helpful to understand what you're voting on. It puts the board in a really precarious position if they are going to interpret what somebody's going to vote for.
We can't script what they say.
Got it. But that's giving you misinformation, because Part A and Part B is part of the same budget, correct?
But technically, they are two separate articles that are warned separately, and they do not attach themselves to each other, because one can go up and one can go down, which happened last year.
Okay, got it.
So yes, you're
Yes.
correct, and yes, she's correct.
Got it.
Or he's correct. It's tough.
Got it.
All right, so we get the survey and nothing else. And we have a committee assignment. Policy committee is going to review
Superintendent
what
said.
Bill pulls together.
Yep.
And I don't think we have any other committee obligations. Let's see, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
So we added the pay orders.
We did add the pay orders.
I have a request about the consent agenda.
Sure.
Since the conception of this board, we've really never approved the consent agenda more than like one meeting in a row. Can we just get rid of a consent agenda, being we only have 2 items on the consent agenda and they're not always at every meeting? In other words, just have approve the minutes and approve the pay orders. 2 different motions. I just think it would be so much simpler than having the discussion of, well, can we take out last week's minutes from the consent agenda? Oh, and wait a minute, we didn't do the pay orders for the last meeting because we had a meeting before, but we did them then. And so, you know what I mean? It's not making any sense to me to have a consent agenda that always has to have something added or taken away, because it's not a true consent agenda. It's the 2 different pieces, and they should just be voted on separately. I just think it would be so much simpler than having a discussion on if we should add this month or separate it, or...
Could I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Could we put that on the reorganization meeting? So you'd have to deal with it for 2 more months. But then in a reorganization
I'm more than
meeting.
happy to look at it in 2 months.
I'll make sure that that's there. Thank you.
Meanwhile, in the next 2 months, let's see how many times we can do the consent agenda at a meeting.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I need to make it?
With the
Just
addition of...
remember that the pay orders have been placed in there.
Yep. So-
And you need to read out.
The amount?
Yeah.
Yep, so we have
And the pay order
number 37. Total amount is $1,091,941.16. You got that? All right, good. Is this in pay order 38?
Whatever Laura says.
Hey, Lori?
Yeah, sorry.
Is there a pay order 38, or we skipping that one?
What was the one I wrote on?
I've got 37 and 39.
Unless it was a special run. I'll have to check it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But let's approve 39.
Yes. All right, so we
Are
also
those
have...
salaries or expenses?
What was
we got payroll and...
million?
All right, so pay order number 39, payroll warrant, in the amount of $214,080.31.
Got it.
And I need 2 signatures on that. Okay. Ken, back to you made the motion, right? To approve the consent calendar. Fair second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, now I just need 2 signatures. Thanks, Joe.
I feel so useful here.
He's quicker in person.
Hey, Joe, we're going to go into executive session, and Jen's going to talk to the team, so I'm going to cut you off, all right, buddy?
Oh.
I can't bring you in.
God.
All right,
That's really, it's all good. I mean, 2.5 hours.
all right, Hey, enjoy, where are you, Kansas?
Kansas.
All right, man, enjoy Kansas.
I'll try.
So we're going to go into executive session for legal, in particular to negotiations. So is there anybody on the board that has to make their own personal decision about a conflict of interest in which they should not enter into executive session? I will leave that up to each individual person.
Negotiations.
Yes, for negotiations.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't be here.
Okay.
Is there anything else besides?
No,
negotiations?
it'll just be negotiations.
Okay. I will recuse myself.
Okay. You too, no. I like it. All right, can we just go back here, Jen?
Bill, you gotta vote to go into session.
Oh, need somebody
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session
for legal.
for legal.
Second.
All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye. Now out of executive session at 9:48. There's no action taken from the executive session. We're looking for the last motion of the evening.
Motion adjourned.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.